Hey guys, and welcome back to this part of this Django and Vue tutorial series. In the previous part we built the front end statically, set up a few components and similar. In this part we're going to handle the back end and a little bit more. So first we can begin with this task, which is to set up a virtual environment for Django. A virtual environment is like a isolated environment on your computer where you can install Python packages like Django, Django Rest Framework, Pillow and similar. It also makes it easier to deploy later, so you can have the same server locally as on the production server and similar. So let's just begin with this one. So if I go to the command line, just split this screen or whatever you do on your system, and then I need to find the folder that my project is in. cd documents projects way, and here I have the front end, I have the templates and a readme. So here I just want to create the virtual environment by saying python 3-m venv, which is short for virtual environment, and then the name, which can just be env. And then here I can then activate this by saying source env bin activate. If I want to deactivate this, I can just say deactivate. Okay, let's activate it again. And since this is now activated, you can see here that the name of the environment is prepended before my username. And if I now want to install a Python package, I can say pip install Django, and then this will install the newest and stable version of Django and the dependencies that Django has. And now this will only be available for this particular environment. Great, so now it should be installed. Let me just move up this bottom line a little bit. There, one of my followers was saying that the bottom lines here was a little bit hard to see sometimes, so hopefully this helps. So now that we have Django, we can also install the Django Rest Framework. So pip install Django Rest Framework. So this REST framework is used for creating APIs for the project we are building, so that the front end built with Vue can talk to the back end. So it's very easy to create views that are returning JSON and serializing data and similar. So then we have that. So check. And next one, which is Django Rest Framework -simple JVT pip install. Now this is an extra package for the Django Rest Framework, so that we can use a JWT for authentication. That is a sort of token authentication, which is very popular. Okay, so that is installed. Then we install Pillow, pip install Pillow. Pillow is a Python library for handling images, so we can resize them or just save them on the server or optimize them and similar. And this is needed in order for Django to use image fields, which we are going to use for the avatars and post images and similar. So now everything is installed, and we can do this now, create a Django project. So we have the way front end, which is very explanatory what this actually is. So then we can create the same name structure for the backend by saying Django-admin start project way backend. So now we have it there. I can go into it, cd way backend, like that. So here I have the manage.py file, which is this administrative script for running things in Django, like creating database tables or super users, or running the development server, collecting static files and similar. In this folder, I can show you what's here. You have the init.py, which is just a file for making this folder sort of like a module. Python will at least make it easier to use the content inside. Settings.py is a global configuration for the whole project. This is where we define the database, the template engine, users and similar. Then you have the WSGI and ASGI, which is entry points for the web server. We will come back to this when we deploy the project later. And then urls.py is sort of like a table of contents for the whole project, where we map the views we create with URLs. So everything there is now done. Next up then is a little bigger task. This is setting up everything. So we need to configure JWT. First I want to do this in the settings. So if I go back to Visual Studio Code and open up settings.py here, then this now is one of the files we just created. Let me just close all of this first. Settings.py. Do you want to install the recommended extensions for Python? Yes, I can do that, just so I have it. This is a very fresh user on this Mac. So this then gives me IntelliSense and similar, which makes it easier to get recommendations for the classes and functions we are going to use and similar. Okay, while this is installing, I can just go back to settings.py and continue the configuration. So here inside the installed apps, we need to add the Django Rest Framework and also the Django Rest Framework simple JWT, like that. So now that we have added these, we can also configure the simple JWT by adding this. So this makes it possible to overwrite the default configurations that simple JWT comes with. So for example, I set the access token life to 30 days. Oops. What happened there? Okay, the installation is done. Okay, so I set the access token life to 30 days, which means that I will be logged in 30 days when you first log in to the application. Then I have the refresh token time life, which is how long I'm able to refresh the token that I have. So if you go in and during those 30 days, you will be logged in again and refreshed for another 30 days up until 180 days, then you will be forced logged out of the application. And then I set something called rotate refresh tokens to false. And this is just that if you already have a refresh token, and then this wouldn't be trashed or banned afterwards. So you can read more about this if you just Google Django Rest Framework and simple JWT if you want to inspect it more. You can see here that I get the warning, so I need to import this. Python import time delta. Always forget where I import this. Okay, so from datetime import time delta. So if I just scroll to the top, I can remove this comment. From datetime import time delta. That's the only one I need. Okay, so then you can see here that I also need to configure the URLs for this. I actually think I want to move this down into the app for the custom user model because I want to add it there. So configure JWT URLs. So let me just remove this. I also noticed down here that I want to configure the CSRF and course, so I need to install one more thing. So if I just go back here and say pip install Django course headers. That's not correct. It's Django dash course dash headers, and this makes it easier or at least possible for a separated front end to talk to the backend and set rules there. So I can check this now. Next step then is to configure the Django Rest Framework. So we have already added it here, but we need to add it a little bit more here and talk about or tell Django how to authenticate users and similar. So we can set this, for example, below the simple JWT. Then you have this for overriding the default things that comes from the REST framework. We want to set the default authentication clauses to use JWT authentication, and the default permission clauses is that you should be authenticated to get data from the backend. So this is now the default one, and we can override this per view and similar. Let's come back to that later. Okay, so then I can set this to done. Next step then is to configure the CSRF and CORS. So we need to set up this CSRF, which is the cross-site request forgery, I think it stands for. So that and this is very connected, and things that we need to do in order to comply with the Django security things. So let's just go back to settings.py again. So below here I can set up something called the CORS allowed origins. So this URL is allowed to talk to the backend, and this address here is the same as you can find here. It might be a little bit different on your computer. And then below here we can set the CSRF trusted origins, which is the same address as up here. And then down here in the installed apps I can add the CORS headers, which is one of the things we just installed. So now everything is added here. These are configured. Then we just need to add the middleware here so that Django knows that we will be using the CORS headers before we use the common middleware for Django. So here we can say CORS headers.middleware.CORS middleware. I know that this can be a little bit much information right now to handle at once, but hopefully it's not too much to handle. If you have any questions about this, feel free to leave a comment below and I will answer as soon as I can. So now I think everything is okay here, so I can go back to the to-do list, set this to done, I can set this to done, and I can set this to done. So now I actually set up the backend and everything there should be okay. Before I continue, I just want to say thanks to all of my patrons. If you too want to support me, you will find a link in the description below. So the next step then is to create an app for the custom user models, because I don't want to use the built-in that Django comes with, because this will make it easier to add extra fields like the avatar and similar. So we can begin by creating the app. So let's just go to the command line. And then here on the right side, Python manage.py. So now we talk to the script, start app account. No module named Django Rest Framework. I thought I installed it. Django Rest Framework. Okay, it actually might just supposed to be REST framework here. Sorry about that. Let me try to now again start the app. No module named REST framework. Okay. I have to Google this. Pip install Django Rest Framework. What did I do wrong? Pip install Django Rest Framework. Okay, there was supposed to be an underscore. Sorry about that. Save. Let me try one more time. And now the app was created. Perfect. So let me find it here again. Account. Then we have the views. Tests if we wanted to do that. Models for telling Django what we want to store in the database. Apps is just configuration for this app. Admin.py is where we can register models so we can see them in the admin interface. Init.py is just telling Django that we want to use this as a module. Okay, so let's start setting up the models.py. So first I just want to import UUID, so we can have UUID, unique identification things for the users instead of the typical increasing integers. And then from Django auth models I want to import the abstract base user, permissions mixin, and user manager, because I want to override these and create our own so it's easier to use them later in this project. And from Django.utils I want to import time zone so that we can use that to handle when the user last logged in and similar. Okay, so I just pasted a little bit of code here. So now this is a custom user manager, so I can talk to the model we are going to create a little bit easier. Create user function, create super user function, and similar. If you're a little bit familiar with Django from before, you know that you can run Python manage.py, create super user, but that user requires different fields than what we are going to use. So for example, here I want the name, email and password. And then up here, this is typically more normal what the default looks like. So now that we have a custom user manager, it's easier to talk with the model we are going to create. And then the model for the user will look like this. Okay, or something like that. Let me just convert everything to space like that. So we want to use the abstract base user and the permissions mix in. First, I set up the ID field, which uses the UUID, which we imported at the top. Then I want the field for handling the email, which should also be the username. One field for the name, one field for the avatar. And this is an image field, and the images will be uploaded to a folder called avatars. I want one field for checking if the user is active. This is a boolean, and it's default to true. Later in the series, we're going to set this default to false, so that the user have to click an email and activate their user. You can also check here if it's a super user, if it's staff, and similar. Then we have a date joined, which will set automatically to timezone.now, which is now. Last login to check when the user last used the account. And then we have the objects, which just refers to the custom user manager. So what happens here is that, for example, when we say now user.objects.all, that means that we get the objects here and not the default objects that the typical model is using. Then down here we specify which of these fields we want to be the username, which should be the email field, and which fields to be required. This should maybe actually blank equals true. I think this should be like this because we want to require that. Actually not sure if this should be filled out or what. I just tend to use it like this, and up here is authentication anyway. So okay, let's just leave it like this. Then we need to tell Django that the default user model is this one and not the one that Django comes with. So here in the settings.py, we can set this below here. You can just say auth user model account, which is the app, user, which is the model, and save. Okay, so now we have set up the model and everything there. That means that I think we can now first run the make migrations. So Python manage.py make migrations. No, this has not been installed. Okay, sorry, I forgot to add the account here. Account, save. Let's try again. Then you can see here create model user, and then Python manage.py migrate to actually run the migrations. So now everything here was created. Nice. And then our DB SQLite database is also created there. Nice. Okay, so now that that is done, I can go back to the to-do list. So we now have added this to the settings. We have created the model. And then I need to configure the JWT URLs for this. So in the account app here, I want to create a new file called urls.py. And then here I need to import from the REST framework JWT something called views, and there we import a class called token obtain pair view, which is the view we use to log in and to get the two tokens, the refresh and access token. And then we have one view for refreshing that token. Then in here I can just say URL patterns, which is a list. And then you can see here we just say path login. And when we go into that one, we want to use this class as a view, and we just say name token obtain. You can see here I get a little warning because I haven't imported this from Django. from Django.urls import path. Then the warning is gone. And then I need one more path refresh from the token refresh view as view name token refresh and save. So I think that should be it for now. Sorry, I need to do one more thing. The main URLs py file, I need to import a URLs file we just created. So here I need to import include from Django.urls together with path. And then down in here, if we go to a URL called path, and this begins with API slash, then we want to use the one called include account.urls. So if the URL we try to visit or use now is API, then it will try to go in here and find if one of the URLs matches this one. So if it's API/login, it will use this one. If it's the other one, it will use this one. And if it's none of these, it will continue down this list. Okay, so let's set this to done and this to done. So now I want to make it possible to sign up. As you can see here, I have this implement verification, reset and forgot password and similar. This will come later in this course. I just want to get this thing up and running as a minimum viable product to see that everything is running and similar. Anyways, let's make it possible to sign up. So what we need to do then is we need to create a new file here for the API calls for signing up the user and similar. Okay, so in the account app, create a new file, api.vue. We could put this in the views.py if we wanted to, but I like to keep things like this in the api.py file because it makes a little bit more sense. So here we can say from django.http import JSON response because we want to return JSON as the data form. And then I want to import some decorators from the REST framework. So from REST framework .decorators import API view authentication clauses and permission clauses. So this makes it possible to handle a view as an API view. This can override the authentication default clauses that we set here in the settings.py, and same with this one. The permission clauses can override this if we wanted to, because we can't require that the user is authenticated, for example, to create a user. So here, then down here we can say at API view, and we expect this to be a post request. We don't want get data here and similar. We don't want the user to go to this URL and similar. Then def sign up, pass in the request parameter, and then to get the data that the user sends to us, we say data equals request.data. Then this will be a dictionary or list with the data like the username or email and password. We can set the default message, for example, to be success, and then return JSON response, parentheses, curly brace, and then status message. And if the user isn't signed up, for example, we can return this as a error message and similar, but it can be like this right now. Then I just want to import this to the urls.py before I continue. So inside urls.py, which is located in the account app, here we can say from .import views. So we just import the entire, from .import API, we import the entire file. So path sign up / sign up name sign up. API.signup. So now this points to this view we just created, and the URL for this will now be API/signup. Before I do anything more here, I want to create a form for this so that Django can handle the validation So forms.py. And then here I want to import the default user creation form from Django. From django.contrib.auth.forms import user creation form. And then I want to import the model we just created. So from models import user. So instead of importing the user from Django contrib auth models, we import it here. And then here we can say class sign up form, pass in the user creation form. And then we set the class meta so we can configure this a little bit. We want to say the model to be user, so we point up to this one, and then which fields we want. And here we want the email field, the name field, the password 1 field, and the password 2 field. And then the password 2 is just repeating of this one. So then I can save this, and then we can import this into api.py. So from forms import sign up form. Then below here is a form equals sign up form. Then just fill this out with email data.get email. Just copy and paste the name, password 1, password 2, password 1, password 2. Okay, so that should be it there. Then we can see if this form is valid by saying if form.isValid, just like we do on a regular form. And if this is valid, we can just say form.save, and then the user should be created. If the form isn't valid, we can say message equals error, and then this will return an error instead. So now the view for creating a user is ready. Here we could, for example, say send verification email later and save. So that's everything we need to do here now. It's imported to the URLs, so now this should be available to be used in the front end. Nice. Actually, I need to set up these two decorators as well. So set this to be empty and permissions classes to be empty. So now we can access this view without being authenticated, which makes sense. So everything there is now done. So now I want to work a little bit in the front end. Let me just look at the to-do list. Yes, there is nothing particular here or more detail, so still on this task. So if I now find way front end, source, stores, and then create a new store, user.js. So just like here, we keep track of things like the message we want to show, the classes and similar. Here we want to do the same thing, but we want to keep track of everything connected to the user. So first I import the defined store from Pinya, and then I import Axios because I want to use this store also to talk to the backend. And then below here, I say export const use user store. Then we set this to be a defined store. The first thing I want to set here is the ID, which can just be user. And then just like in the toast, we can set the state for whatever data we want to store about the user. To keep this as clean as possible, I just want to store one object in here with several properties. And this should have the is_authentication set to be false, the user ID, the username, the email, the access token, and the refresh token. So everything of this will now be stored in the state, and I also want to store it in the browser so that when you refresh and similar, you will be automatically logged in. And just like here, we will also need a few actions. And I know that this part that's coming up now can be a little bit confusing. There will be a lot of code, but don't worry, when we start using this later in this project, you will also understand much more and why it's easier to just make it finished now. So first I want to create one action called init store for initializing the store. And what I do first here is to check if the local storage, which is something in the browser, has an item called user.access, which is the user access token. Then I know that the user should be logged in. And what we do then is to set the state up here to, for example, this.user.access. Then we get it from the local storage. And I will do it with all of these values. Then we set this to be authenticated to be true. So in theory, the user is now authenticated. But to make sure that you are actually allowed to be authenticated, we call this.refresh token, which will talk to the backend and make sure that you are within the days that we set in settings.py, these here, that you are authenticated. And then I just go to the console log to print this out just to make sure that everything is okay. I will show you later in this part how we are going to call this. And this will be created further down in this actions list. Next, I have an action called set token where we pass in a list of data called data. Then I just want to console log it so that every time we log in a similar, I can see this and just verify that it's okay. Then we set the access token, the refresh token, and that you are authenticated. And then we store these two in the database. Next, I have one for logging out called remove token. Then we console log this, set everything in the state to be null, and then everything that is stored in the local storage to be empty. So that now you are logged out and you will be redirected to the login page or the front page or whatever you decide to later. Also, one more called set user info. So when we log in, we automatically will just get typically the token from the backend. So we need to do one more call where we will get this back. And this user variable will continue to contain the user ID, the name of the user, and the email. And possibly also the avatar and probably more fields also later. Then we store all of this in the local storage and just console log that the user stored in the state is this user. And then last but not least, we have the refresh token action. So what this does is that it now send a post to this. This is not the correct URL. It's supposed to be API/account/refresh. And it sends this information, which should be up here. And this information is pulled from the browser in this action here. And when this is done, we get the response. Now we just store the access token because the access token is the only thing we get back from the server. Now we can also set that the access default headers should be authorization, bearer, and then we pass in the response data.access. It's very important that you remember this space. I know that many people don't notice this, but it's bearer, space, and then the ticks. If there are an error in the refresh, for example, that you have gone over the 180 days, then we will show an error in the browser and then say just this remove token, which calls this here. You will be logged out and redirected. So it was a little bit much code at once now, but I hope you are able to follow along. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below and I will answer as soon as I can. Great, so now that we have a way to store everything about the user, the backend should be ready. Then we can continue to open up the sign up view and make sure that when we fill out this information, we can pass it on to the backend. So at the bottom here, we can create a script tag. The first thing I want to import here is Axios. So import Axios from Axios. And then export default. And then in here, I want to create one method called setup. So that when we go in here and set up everything here, I want to use the toast store to show a message that the user was created or if there was an error. So here we can say const toast store equals use toast store, return toast store. So now this should be available to be used other places in this script. And then below here we set up the data, so we can store different things, return. Actually, this is supposed to be a function. And then in here we have the form, where we can have different fields like the email, set this default to be empty, name, default empty, password 1, default empty, and password 2, default empty. And then I also want one more variable here called errors, which should be a list, but default empty list. And then below here we set up the methods. I want to a sign up method, so that when we click sign up, the button here, we should call this function. So sign up or submit form maybe. Then first we can default set this errors equals empty, so that if you do anything wrong, try to send it in again, it will be reset. And then here we want to do some very simple validation of the data. We can say if this.form.name equals empty, then we push this string into the list of errors. Your name is missing. And we can do the same thing with the password. Password 1, your password is missing. And we can also check if this form.password and this form.password 2 is similar. If this.form.password1 not equals this.form.password2, then this.errors.push the password does not match. Okay, and we also need to do the same thing with the email. Can have this at the top. Email, your email is missing. Email, like that. Okay, so once the validation has gone through, we can say if this.errors.length is zero, then we know that we can send this to the backend and everything should hopefully be okay. And then in here we can use the Axios we imported at the top. Axios.post, and here we want to post to /API/signup, which is the view we created here. So here we're going to send an email, name, password 1 and password 2. So since we stored everything in this variable, the only thing we need to append and send in is actually just this.form. And when this is done, we can say then response, then we get something back from the server, or we can say catch error if there are any errors. And if there are any errors, we can say console.log error. This is typically not the type of errors we want to show here anyways. And then here, if the response is good or bad, we can do a check here. So what we sent from the backend here was a status, but it should actually be message. So then here we can say if response.data.message is success, else, and if it's a success message, we want to show a green toast down in the right corner. To do that, we can say this.toastStore, which will point up to the toast store we have here, show toast, which is this function here. And here we pass in that we want to show this in 5,000 milliseconds or 5 seconds. Then the message, the user is registered, please log in. And the background can be PG Emerald 500, for example. And if it's an error, we can say this.toastStore.showToast 5,000, something went wrong, please try again. And then this can be BG Red 300. Okay, so now we give some feedback back to the user if it went okay or if there was something wrong. And after that at least, no, sorry, inside here, if the user is registered, then we can say this.form.email empty, just so we can reset the form. Password 1 and password 2. Okay, so hopefully everything should work here now. No, I forgot one thing, and that was, of course, when we click this or submit the form, v-on submit.prevent submit form equals submit form. So when we submit this, as you can see here, we want to prevent default so that we don't refresh the screen as similar. We just want to call a method called submit form, and this submit form is this method down here. And then we need to connect these 4 fields with these 4 variables down here. So after type, I can say v-model form.email, copy this, paste password 1, password 2, and the name form.name, and save. So I noticed that I have not done anything to show the errors if there are any. So you can show this above the sign up button. Template v-if. So if there are any errors, I think I can say it like this. Then we can say div class bg red 300. Text can be white rounded LG my6, so I have some space above and below this. Actually, this is already handled there, so I don't need this my6. But I want some padding in here, p-6. Okay, I think that's okay. And then in here, p v-4, so we want to loop through all error in errors. v-bind :key, because we need to make this element unique. If not, Vue won't work. So you can just say error. And then in here we want to print the error. Sorry, not brackets, curly braces. We are using Vue now. Okay. So I think that's it. There are no errors there. Let me try to run this. Run server, no, Python measured by run server. Yes, so now it's running at this address, which we set up as the default URL for Axios in the previous part in main.js. So if I now go back to VTEP, open up the inspector just so I have it here. I can open up the console so it's easy to see errors. If I now go to sign up, boop, use toast store is not defined. Probably just forgot to import it. Import use toast store from /stores/toast. Hopefully. Refresh. The requested module does not provide an export named default. What? Toast.js. Export const. Okay, so everything should be okay. I just imported it the wrong way. Okay, so it's a little bit different syntax. So import toast store from @stores.toast like that. Refresh. Okay, so now the error is gone, but that reminded me that I need to do a little change in the app.vue because I need to tell Vue where to put this data. So here in the app.vue, I need to create a script tag at the bottom here. And then I need to import the toast component and not the toast store. And then I need to set up the export default components. So I need to tell app.vue that we're going to use this toast here. And then I can just paste it below here. So now the toast component has a way to insert itself in the DOM somewhere. Return outside function. Okay. Use toast store. That did not look very good. Okay, so the problem is not inside the sign up view, but in the toast.view, which we created in the previous part. Const store. Okay, just need to Google this. View composition API return store. So it looks like this. But what if I want to have it in the script tag? Script setup like this. So it's just set up like this, blah blah blah. So it's just set up like this. Maybe I don't need to return it. Maybe it's okay like this. Let me try to go back and see. Refresh. There are no errors at least, but this should not be showing. So maybe I need to check the length there as well. So if this is greater than 0, nice. Okay, so sorry about that little back and forth. Name Stein LZ, code with stein@gmail.com, and then a password. Sign up. The user is registered. Please log in. Okay, if I try to go to the terminal, you can see here that this was posted. So in theory, the user should have been created now. So we can verify this by going in here again and say Python stop the web server, Python manage.py shell from account.models import user, users equals user.objects.all users. And then we have the user here with the username codestein@gmail.com. User equals users.first, user.email, user.name. Nice. So now the sign up is working and we can run the server again. So that means that I now can go back and set this task and this task to done. And now I want to make it possible to log in. That means that we should be able to get and refresh tokens. So we can begin by copying a little bit here and put it in the login view. At least these two I know I'm going to use, and then I can close a little bit here. Open up login view. And then at the bottom I can paste this, export default like that, close the script. And then I can set up the methods first. And here we should also need a submit form method. And when we call or submit here, we say v-on submit.prevent, and we call the submit form like that. And we need to connect these two down here so we can set up the data, return, email, empty, password, empty. And we should also probably set this in a form, so we can just put in all of the form at once. Errors can default be an empty list. Sorry, I forgot to add a colon. Then we can set up the vmodels here. Vmodel form.email and vmodel form.password. Save. And I can also copy one more thing, and that is the error showing here. Like that. So if there are any errors, this will show. Okay, I also know that I'm going to use the user store because now we're actually going to get the data from the server we want to store here. So at the top here we can set up the setup of this page, and then const user store equals use user store, return user store. So now this should be available to be used down here and also in the template if we need it. So then I can go back to the sign up view again and copy a little bit. We can copy this to reset the errors list, and we can copy the validation for, we can take these two, paste it. If form.email is empty, your email is empty, and if the password is empty, your password is missing. And we can also just copy this line here, and this, and this. Actually, you can just copy the whole thing, so we have it, paste it, and then close this if up here. This can just be removed for now, and we want to use the API/login. And if we open up the urls.py file there, it should be this one, which should return a token back to us. So when we get this token, we want to store this in the user store, which we are importing up here. So to do that, we can just say this.store.setToken and pass in everything we get from the backend, which should be an access token and a refresh token. And this function here is the one we have in the user.js, the set token, as you can see there. And this will also store this in the browser and set our user to be authenticated. And then I just want to set the default headers again, just like we do on this initialize, because now I don't want to call this because everything here is not set yet. So now we have this here, and we can get information from the backend in the correct way. So let me save this now. And what I want to do now is to make this function here, the submit form, an async method. So that means that I can pause things down here before we continue. And that's exactly what I want to do with this one. Await Axios. And when this is done, and this is okay, then I want to get more information from the backend. So below this Axios request, I have one more Axios request, which will go to API/me. And this will have information like your name and similar, which we don't get up here. And when this is stored, we just say this.router push /, which will return us to the front page of Way. Maybe we should be sent to feed instead. Save. So now we just need to create this view in the API.py. So here we can say at API view. Here we just want to have get request because we just want to get this information and post anything to it. We don't want these two because now we want to use the default authentication classes here, which is the JWT, and that we are authenticated. So you can say def me request, and then in here we can just say return JSON response. We want to return the ID, the name, and the email. So that was it for there. Then we just need to import this to the URLs here. Path me / api.me name me. So now everything should be ready to be tested. There are no errors, no errors. The browser refresh. We have the user created. So now I should be able to go to login. Login with code with Stein, which is the email I used. If I write anything there, you'll see that I get the 401 authorization error. That's okay because I didn't write correct password now. I will handle showing errors here later, but if I sign in with the correct password, I still get this. Okay, that's not good. Unauthorized. Why am I unauthorized? Login did not work. API login. Login view. Send the email and the password. Okay, if I just go here now, open up the network tab. Often there is better information here. Response, no active account found with the given credentials. Coded Stein, that was what I was using. Okay, still. Okay, yes, so now it was working because now I was writing the correct passwords. You can see here now that I get the refresh token and I get the access token. Both of these should be in here. Refresh first and then access. So now these should be stored in the database, but I have a new error here. Authentication credentials was not provided. Okay. So that means that this didn't work as expected. Just the console.log response .data.access, just to make sure that that's what we are setting down here. Okay, so let me just try to log in one more time, just to refresh so everything is okay. Log in. Okay, so everything there is okay. Console.log. Can't read properties of undefined set token, so that is not working. The set token, which is this one, which points to this.store, which should be this.user store. And same down here, this.user store. That means that it couldn't go past that point. Let me try one more time. Log in, and now I was redirected to the front page. Nice. But if I now refresh, I will not be authenticated anymore, which is something I just want to fix before we continue, and that is done in the app.vue. So here I want to import the user store just like we did here. So import, copy, paste, and we can copy this entire thing, put it at the top here, fix the indentation, and then before everything starts to happen here, we're going to call something called before create. Then we want to do something in here. This is supposed to be a function like this. And what we want to do here is just this.userstore.init. What did we call it? Init store. Like that. And then everything here should be fixed or run. And then I want to get the token by saying this.token equals this.userstore.user.access. Now we can check if we actually got this, and we only get this if we go into here and say if token. Now we want to set the default headers again with the bearer token, and if we don't get this, we want to set the empty default. We can just copy this, paste like that, and save. So if we now go back and refresh, there is something wrong. Console Axios is not defined. Okay, that's valid since we didn't import it. Import Axios from Axios. Save. And now there is no errors here anymore. So that means that this is hopefully working. Let's go to user.js, say console.log init store. Refresh, then you can see that we go in there. Now you can see in here console.log user has access. Refresh, and it did not go in there. That means that the user isn't authenticated. So this was probably not working. That's weird. Let me just try to log in again. Log in. So set user info, sets the token. So we have this function set token with the data access. So that should be working. Let me try to console log this here. Console.log user.access, like that. Just refresh now. We are still not logged in, so there is something wrong here. Login, user access. So this is okay. But why is it not okay here? Let me see what is there. Okay, you can see here, there is something wrong. You can't find this URL API account refresh. And that is the one that is called when we go there. Refresh, API account refresh. API account refresh should be correct. No, it should not include the account. Like that. Let me refresh now. Not working. Okay, login. Sorry about the back and forth. Typically. Log in. Okay, now I didn't get allowed to be logged in. There's always something. Login, detail, no active account. Okay, probably wrote the password wrong. Code Stein with, that's not my name. Code with Stein. Okay, so now I was logged in. Similar. Open up the console. You can see that things here looks okay. And now if I refresh, everything is okay. So that means that there was just something wrong somewhere here. But now this is okay. So I'm now logged in. So it was this refresh token that was not working as it should with this URL here. So now refresh is working and I'm still authenticated. Nice. So now I can go here, set this task to done, because now we can log in, log and refresh and similar. Nice. Okay, so now I want to do a little few changes up here. For example, I only want to show this when we are authenticated. So if we now go to app.vue, you can see here that this is hard coded. But I only want to show this when we are authenticated. And down here you can see that we have access to the user store. So this should be very simple. You can see here v-if user store. That's not the, we want this one, which is the variable for the user store. .user.is authenticated. And now this just points to the variable that we have here, or here to be precise. So if we save this now, go to the browser, you can see that this is not working. Okay, I've stopped the server. Okay, so if I just refresh again now, you can see here init store is not working anymore because we are not authenticated now. So now this is gone because we are not authenticated. And when we are not authenticated, I want to show a login and sign up button here instead. So if I just find the sign, it should be somewhere here. Login. Yes, then we have these two buttons instead. So if I now just copy this, we can do the same thing here on this one. But actually I want to add a template tag here because I want to have more in here later. So if we are authenticated, we show the avatar. If not, we say template v-else. So here I want to add a login and logout button. So I can copy this, add it to HTML. And it should actually be a router link and not an anchor tag. router link, and this should go to, then just /login. Let me copy this, paste it, and say purple instead of gray, and then this should have the title sign up, and go to sign up and save. So if I now go back to the page, you can see that I have them here. I should also have some spacing between them. For example, the login button can have an MR4 for margin right 4, like that. So now this should take me to the login page, and this should take me to the sign up page. Great. Let me try to log in again. Log in. Okay, so now I'm authenticated. These are showing again, my avatar and the login button are gone. Refresh is still working and everything is good. So I don't think there is a front page. We don't need it actually. Okay, so that was not actually a task, but maybe I should add it here just so I know that this is done. Fix buttons in menu when authenticated, and just set it to done. So now everything should be working here. Okay, and that was it for this part. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please hit like below. If you have any questions about today's code, feel free to leave a comment below and I will answer as soon as I can. See you in the next video.